Hello and welcome to the Doofcast, a film and TV podcast from Doof Media. My name is Scott Daly, and joining me, as always, coming at you live from behind the eightfold fence, it's Matt Freeman. How's it going today, Matt?
Just very, very fine and good.
Oh, you don't have any, you don't want to tell me how you're feeling about anything?
I am feeling the appropriate emotions for this situation.
This week on the show, we are so excited to be taking a look at AMC's newest series, the smash hit 10-episode series that just wrapped up this week. We're going to be talking all about Shogun. Oh my gosh, I've been looking forward to this for literally 10 weeks, Matt. So here we are, and we got so excited about having this conversation that we accidentally had half of this conversation in Discord 2 days ago.
Yeah. Right. Now that I can end the bit of pretending to be emotionless, I'm extremely excited about this. So I guess I'll just very briefly say, I've read everything James Clavell has ever written, but the thing is, I read it all when I was ages 15 to 17, so I don't remember it super well, but I have always loved it. It's always been important to me. I didn't even know they were making a Shogun show until it was already halfway out and I was catching up. So this is just an amazing, wonderful surprise for me. And of course, not only are they making a Shogun show, but it's amazing. It's the best thing I've seen in a long time. So yeah, just very happy.
Yeah. I mean, I think we're going to be talking all about spoilers. So if you're listening to the show because you were curious about what our overall thoughts on Shogun are, I'm right there with you, Matt. I think this is unquestionably my favorite thing I've watched this year so far. And it just has catapulted up there to be almost inarguably one of the best television shows ever made. And that maybe recency bias a little bit there, maybe. But I think this is remarkable work. I was absolutely blown away. Every single episode was a joy. This was appointment viewing for me. Tuesday night would happen, and I would sit down as soon as the kids went to sleep, and we'd watch an episode of Shogun. And I just, it's such a good show. It's so good. And we'll get into all the details of why here in just a little bit.
We will.
So yeah, that's going to be our episode. The other thing I wanted to do, Matt, today is I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the trailer for the newest M. Night Shyamalan film, and a little bit about trailers in general and how movies are marketed in this weird time we live in where, getting people to come to a theater to see a movie is harder than ever.
Yeah, that sounds fun. All right.
Yeah. All right, let's get into Shogun. Matt, what is this? What is this show all about?
When a mysterious European ship is found marooned in a nearby fishing village, Lord Yoshi Toranaga discovers secrets that could tip the scales of power and devastate his enemies.
This show was created by Rachel Kondo and Justin Marks. It is based, as Matt said, on the 1975 James Clavell novel of the same name. It stars Hiroyuki Sanada, Cosmo Jarvis, Anna Sawe, and Tadanobu Asano, amongst a whole bunch of other actors. This is a absolutely stocked cast of incredible actors, some of which I recognize from things and some of which I have never had the pleasure of seeing perform before. Matt, where do you want to begin with this? It's 10 episodes long, 10 hours of television to cover this one book. My understanding is, and I don't want to go too much into the details of the book itself, but my understanding is this show ends where the book ends, essentially. So we really just covered this entire book over one show. I read an interview today where the creators of this thing were basically like, no, we're probably not going to do any more. We did the book. I know Clavell has written more, but this was the story we wanted to tell, and we're good. So where do you want to begin?
Yeah, well, I just want to mention the other books that Clavell has written are not even close to being sequels to Shogun. They're other periods of history. Many of them aren't even about Japan. So if they were going to do more seasons, it would just be something else entirely. Yeah, where to begin? I mean, I think it's funny. I guess I'll just continue the thread of what you just said, talking about all these amazing actors, all these amazing characters. I'm so used to watching TV shows where they try to juggle a bunch of different characters, and you always kind of feel like, yeah, and then we get to this plot line and this is the one that kind of drags and I'm kind of less interested in this. And, you know, I'm excited to get back to so-and-so. And I was just amazed that I was never any less than fully interested in what was happening on the screen.
Yeah.
Like even if we were following like Omi, you know, like some relatively tangential to the plot character, the show just invests you in the texture of the world so well, and everything is so subtle and like really rewards paying attention to the most minute of like changes in facial expressions. So you're just like you're just so absorbed. Like it's one of the few things I've seen recently where I'm just like absolutely just transported away from my body for the 1 hour that it's on the screen.
Yeah, I think the subtlety of the show is something that I really do appreciate about it, and essentially it is a story about kind of people's secret heart, right? I think that's an expression that is used. I mean, we get the eightfold fence explanation from Mariko, but like that these are people that have to kind of exist in this world where what they want has to remain kind of hidden under multiple layers of things and expectations and norms and all these things. And so the show handling things subtly is almost becomes a requirement based on that. And I think it is so interesting the way in which this is a show that doesn't hold your hand, and it trusts the audience to come along with you. Like I think here's this is maybe where we can begin is the end, because this is a show that I was completely riveted with the entire time, but also the entire time I was just like, okay, when are we going to do the big samurai battle? When is, because that's coming, right? Like that's going to come. And we got to the last episode and like we have, you know, this Crimson Sky thing set up, and then episode 9 is titled Crimson Sky, and like no big battle happens, and I was like, huh, okay, well episode 10 surely this is where the big battle happens. And then of course no, it doesn't. The closest thing we get to a big battle is Toranaga thinking about years in the future about the big battle that he's going to have, and then basically saying, and it will be over before it even began. And like there's a version of you that looks at that and goes, oh man, that's a bummer. I thought we were going to get a big battle. But like, that's just like 39 years of watching movies and television, like just like imprinted on me, and the expectation. If you're paying attention to the show and what it's doing, like it's not about the big battle. And that's the thing that I loved, especially about the finale, the last episode, was it was an episode and a conclusion that was about the quiet moments. It was essentially the denouement, like the climax of the story is Mariko taking her life, or you know, sacrificing her life, achieving her goals, and thusly setting everything up for everything else. That is essentially the climax, and this is the denouement. But it's this beautiful hour of television of just, you know, characters reacting to this event and talking to each other, and reveals. Yes, we get Toranaga's kind of reveal of what his plan was and his machinations was, sort of. But that we get to exist in this moment, like, and I know this is how the book ends too, right? Like the book does not have the big battle in it either. So like, I'm not saying that like they betrayed the heart of the story or anything. What I'm actually saying is it's pretty remarkable to me that in the year 2024 we can make a show that many have compared to Game of Thrones kind of constantly throughout its run, and then not do the big fight stuff ever in it, like, and not have a network pressuring you to being like, no, you at least have to like, okay, maybe the battle doesn't actually happen, but when Toranaga is talking about it, maybe then we just film it and like show it. Like that they resist the urge to do those kind of things, I think is pretty remarkable. That this is a show that is allowed to just mostly be people in a room talking, and mostly being a show about language and communication and the ways in which we do and don't communicate and can't and won't communicate. Wow.
Yeah, I mean, that's the most beautiful thing about it is it absolutely honors the spirit of the novel. And really, I mean, it's funny. I've been thinking a lot lately about James Clavell's storytelling sensibilities in general, and I'm not going to just like spoil a bunch of other James Clavell books, but most people know The Great Escape, the film The Great Escape,
Mm-hmm.
and I only learned recently that he was the co-writer of that movie.
I did not know that.
And it's that's like another quintessential James Clavell ending, honestly, where it's like I am going to spoil The Great Escape, which is like a 50-year-old movie now. So
Yes.
the almost all of the POWs that escape get rounded up by the Nazis, and it's like they're going to be taken back to the prison yet again after yet another round of wacky hijinks. We escape, and you catch us, and you bring us back to the prison, and we try to escape again, and we're all gentlemen here. And then they just line up the Americans in the field and gun them down with machine guns.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like gut wrenching because you're like that. I didn't that, but and like that's like what he goes for is he's kind of holding out to you like you think you're in this kind of story, but actually you're in this much more interesting kind of story
Mm-hmm.
that was there the whole time, and you were actually enjoying the better version of the story. You just didn't realize it because you've been fed baby food your whole life.
Yeah.
and then when you get to that finale, it's extremely satisfying, and it makes for a very memorable story, really.
Mm-hmm.
Although when I was younger, I would get mad at his endings because they felt just like a punch in the face often. And like in this one, Mariko dying at the end, you're like, oh Jesus, like,
Yeah.
I guess, it's just, she got exactly what she said she wanted the entire show, right? So you're
Right.
not even like, why are you surprised, right?
Yeah, she was telling you the entire time, this is what she wants. This is exactly what she wants. Yeah. So why would you be surprised at that at all? And yet you are still surprised and heartbroken.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the ending episode is great. I mean, I it was funny. I remember we were chatting just after the 9th episode, but before the finale, and you were like, "How are they going to fit the battle in?" And I was, and I think I just barely held myself back from saying like, "Well, the episode was called Crimson Sky, so that was Crimson Sky, which is what Toranaga says." And
a wonderful line is I sent a woman to do something an army could never do. It's like fucking awesome. The dialogue in the show just fucking amazing across the board.
Yeah, I mean, we did get some fun samurai combat. But it was in episode 9. It was when they were trying to escape. There was plenty of good.
No, there was action. Yeah, I don't want to make it seem like there was no action in this series. No, for sure. But there was like, again, I think the Game of Thrones comparisons really threw people for a loop, especially. It's funny because if you think about the first season of Game of Thrones, they had no money for that show. And like famously, there's a big battle that takes place in that book, and they just knocked Tyrion out and then didn't show the battle. And that's how how they got around the cost limitations. But I mean, I don't know. Like there's an expectation with this type of prestige television that we have to go extravagant with our action sequences. But yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. The action sequence in episode 9 with Mariko and her group of men trying to leave the castle was incredible. Just incredible. Like can we talk about the filmmaking of that sequence? We've got so much things to talk about that maybe getting this granular is a bad idea, but like
I wanted to talk about this sequence anyway.
It's
Go ahead.
Fucking incredible. Like just how the arrows, like it's been set up. The first angle of them approach this courtyard is from behind the shoulders of the archers. So like, the archers are there, but then when the arrows start coming, it's almost as if they're like coming out of nowhere because we're not cutting back to like a person releasing an arrow or set. Like it's just, it's terrifying and it's amazing. And the way Mariko fights in the scene is so good because it's like, she definitely has training and that had been established that she has training and knows how to do this, but she's also desperate. And like, you can see the desperation in her swings of the thing. And you can also see that the men she's fighting they don't want to kill her. But they can't let her go either. And it's just like this, it's everything about it is so good. And I mean, we're gonna say this probably 100 times, but Anna Sawe, who did Mariko, like, holy shit, man! Like,
Yeah.
best performance. I was gonna say television performance, and then I was like, I don't know why I would classify, like, best performance I've seen in a long time. This woman is incredible.
Incredibly solid. Yeah. No, it's interesting. I listened to an interview with the creators, and they basically, or I don't remember who said this exactly, but just like this feeling that your sense of who the protagonist of the show is shifts over the course of the show. And I think by about that point, you kind of realize, like, oh, I'm pretty sure Mariko is the protagonist.
Yeah, this is her show. Totally.
There's just one little moment in the fight that I want to draw attention to as like a microcosm of the attention to detail here, because like we have like an embarrassment of riches in terms of like great action content, right? But like the subtlety and precision and like detail of really everything in the show, I think is exemplified by this, where there's a thing that happens in this fight that I didn't even notice, and it's like the coolest thing I've seen in an action movie in like 3 years. And it's like the first guy, when Mariko says kill him, and then the guy walks out in his samurai armor, and he's standing across from the two other guys, and he draws and he whips out his sword, and the first thing his sword does is it slices across the hand of the guy on his left, and then takes out the throat of the guy on his right. And the guy on his left reaches for his sword, but his hand has been maimed, so he fails to draw his sword. And then the samurai just swipes the sword back the other direction and takes his throat out. And it's like, a quarter of a second, right? And like as certainly, but like you can watch the clip on YouTube, or just watch it on stream. It's like, he absolutely swipes the guy's hand. You can see the guy reach for the sword and unable to grab it because his hand is ruined, and then he's dead. And it's absolute catnip to people like me who just like love martial arts and love like the brutal shit like this. But like that level of attention to detail is in every molecule of the entire show, right? Like even things you didn't even notice, right? It's there was apparently, just to riff in the direction of like the care and precision, like apparently they like there's like the script, which was written in English and then translated into Japanese, but then sort of rewritten in Japanese to be more like idiomatic and correct to the way the people actually spoke. And the way Japanese people would say these things. But then what ends up being in the subtitles isn't necessarily like an exact translation of what the Japanese people are saying. And there's like a lot of thought put into just the absolute precision of like, okay, what are they saying versus what's on the screen, and like what and then that's like a layer on top of the complexity and subtlety of the story that's actually happening. And it's just like, I don't know, it just really impresses me as this just incredibly precise work of art.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I had read about the Japanese as well, that like this is something that unless you are a fluent Japanese speaker, you are not going to notice at all, that they're not speaking modern Japanese. They're speaking a more ancient version of the language. I guess the comparison would be like Old English for us, right? Is like maybe not like old like Middle English, but like just like Shakespearean English a little bit.
Yeah.
And it's just a little bit, it's different. We don't talk like that anymore. And that they care to the attention to detail there, I think, is a testament to that it wasn't just, okay, let's write the script in English, translate it to Japanese, and then, hey, we're good. We did it. And that, I think that becomes really important because the show is essentially about communication. Like the biggest part of the show is this relationship between Blackthorne and Mariko, and how they communicate with each other, how he is a kind of a refuge for her because of the language that they share, but then also the ways in which these scenes between characters with a translator in the middle. And I think one of my favorite parts is we have so many of these translation scenes where Blackthorne is talking to Toranaga, talking to Yabushige, talking to anyone, and Mariko is there translating. And it is every single one of those sequences is not just relaying plot information, but it is characterization of all three characters, because we see Blackthorne in the way he responds, we see Toranaga in the way he responds, but then Mariko in the way that she is reacting and translating and shifting what each one is saying to the other, and controlling that and actively like pushing what she wants, but also revealing who she is via these scenes. They're like, and they all do this, every single one of them. And it's like, those are some of the most riveting sequences in the show to me. And it's three people sitting around the table talking. And frankly, like for the most part, you're just reading the dialogue, right? Because it's in mostly in Japanese.
Yeah. Yeah, right. I love that. She always has her own agenda, and we have just all these different factions and power plays, and that just reminds me of one thing I wanted to hit upon at some point in this conversation, which is like the sort of the joy of cultural exploration, where it spends a lot of time exploring Japanese culture, obviously, and I thought it was very fun how, and I guess the book sort of does this too, but it felt a lot more stark in the show, where you're in this very strange Japanese, ancient Japanese culture. It's very extreme in certain ways. Like the first episode, we got a guy who has to kill himself and his son because he said the wrong thing, right?
Because he spoke out at a meeting, basically.
Because he spoke out at a meeting, and then just like a lot of really intense shit happens, and then it's like, okay, we've got these European characters. We're gonna kind of return to sort of home base with these European characters. We'll feel more comfortable with them, and the European characters are crazy. Like they're all these like extreme zealot, Inquisition era like priests and Protestants who want to kill them. And I mean, I like the best part is the last episode where Blackthorne is like, unfortunately, Catholics like you and Protestants like me will never not be at war.
Yeah.
Ever. And you're like, okay, that's good. But no, I mean, it's like the Europeans are just as alien to us as this ancient Japanese culture. And so the whole show is just this, I mean, it almost feels like fantasy. It feels more fantasy than Game of Thrones, because everything is so different. And yet, of course, all the characters have this deep humanity that you relate to, even if the specific cultural reasons that motivate them don't resonate with us. The inner humanity that underlies that choice does resonate. So like they may be making a decision like, I'm gonna commit ritual suicide, and you're able to follow with them on that journey because they have made it, they've correctly communicated that dramatically. So
I mean, I think Blackthorne still essentially serves as the audience surrogate in this show, just merely because like he is learning this culture along with us. But I do think that what you just said is really important to what the show is doing there, because obviously the ritual suicide, the seppuku, is a huge part of what the show is. And this idea of what does life mean, what does death mean, how do we value these things, and the show is very smart in knowing that we, the primarily Western audience in 2024, are going to look at the idea of killing yourself and your infant because you misspoke at a meeting as crazy. And it's not like the conclusion of the show is not like, no, now you understand that was a good thing that happened. It's actually just, we want you by the end of the show to understand why someone might earnestly and honestly believe that is the correct thing to do with their life. And that is Blackthorne's essential journey throughout the show, and that is why his second to last act in the show is being ready and willing to toss his life aside for the sake of others. It's such this huge moment of growth for him. Not in saying that it is good that we have this ritual suicide thing, but rather like he now understands fully what it means, and why they do it.
Yeah, right. I think it's for him. It's coming to understand like the value of uh, uh, taking things seriously in the
Yeah.
way that they do in this culture.
Yeah,
And
I love the moment with the rock garden guy, and
mhm,
that moment of realization, where he's just I was just kidding. Like I said, anyone touches this, I'll kill him. Ha ha ha. And just
yeah,
like the seriousness with those words are taken, and the importance of understanding this is a place in which your words are taken seriously,
mhm,
and this man took his own life for the sake of the village around him because you were it was causing a disturbance, and that is how life is valued here, and it's certainly different than Blackthorne would or the we would, but getting an understanding of that, this is a good thing to talk about because I've not read this book, but one thing, I was talking to my father about this book because I do have a very distinct memory when I was young, him showing me these books and saying, "Oh, these are like one day you're gonna have to read these," because I loved these books when I was younger. I think he read Shogun when it first came out, and one thing he said to me is like, "This was really like my first." Uh, Detailed like story about Japanese culture, even if it's ancient Japanese culture.
mhm,
Um, and I think that's also what the story served for our country at large. This book and then the 1980 miniseries that was based off of it was like hugely, hugely popular in our
mhm.
country. I think I joked about it back when I first started watching the show with you. I don't remember if I said it on the show or not, but in 1980, more people watched Shogun than watched the Super Bowl last year. Like
Mhm.
it was an incredibly popular miniseries event, and like it definitely is a thing that like served to kind of set and define what Japanese stories are going to be in America from here on out, right? Like, and I was curious of how effective this would be, given that we live in a world where like the Last Samurai with Tom Cruise exists.
Mhm.
That these things, these areas of ancient Japanese culture are things that we've kind of been inundated with since this story came out. That have been repeated and retold many 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 times in a sort of Americanized slant, like this story was too, because it's still not a Japanese man writing the story, but um, I think it's still the fact that it's still remarkably effective, despite like that. You and I went into this knowing what seppuku was and knowing that this was a thing, and understanding samurai and understanding kind of at least at a high level, what it means and what like how all this thing works. Like we understood it, so it's not like being introduced to a culture for the first time. Um, but yet I still found it remarkably effective nonetheless.
Yeah, yeah, that's an interesting point. I mean, I think I was introduced to the idea of seppuku by the novel when I was a teenager, and
Hmm. Hmm.
it's actually quite shocking an idea when you first hear it. Like,
Yeah.
what? Like you're gonna like it's one thing to execute somebody. That's brutal, but we have some innate ability to get our heads around that. But to be like, you were gonna kill yourself on my orders, and then the person actually goes through with it instead of
Yeah.
being like, no, I'm going to make you cut my head off, because why would I want to cut my intestines open? Like that doesn't sound like the way I want to go out. But they like that's the way the culture works, and it's um I agree with you. It's interesting. I don't know. I don't know how different it would be if like this were your first exposure to Japanese culture, because that's very difficult to imagine at this point in history, where we actually have gone from knowing, as a culture over the last like century, gone from knowing nothing about Japanese culture to having like a highly disproportionate interest in Japanese culture, I think,
Yeah.
as
Yeah.
Americans.
A
um
lot spurned by this this
yeah,
story, right? Like, I
yeah,
mean,
yeah,
like I think it's important to say, post World War II, there was a lot of very, very racist, stereotypical. Like what we knew about Japan was very little, and all of it was not favorable. It was very, very racist, very awful, and that continued for a while. And it wasn't until stories like this and that we kind of started to peel back the veil
yeah,
and look at these people as people with a very distinct culture, that we found interesting, and worth studying and understanding.
yeah.
And yeah, this is
I
one of the big pushes towards that direction.
I think it says something though that like a lot of the producers and showrunner level people of this story are Japanese people who love this story and who
Mm-hmm.
wanted it to be like authentic. And it's like, like you said, this is a novel written by is Clavell American or English? I think he's English actually.
That sounds right.
But it's like, but they want it to be authentic. I mean, the other thing about it, which I don't know if you even know this because we didn't talk about it, but like this is a fictionalization of true events. Like
right.
There's Tokugawa, there's the Battle of Sekigahara, there's William Adams, the Englishman who sailed to Japan, and Tokugawa actually met him and like sort of sucked him in and never let him leave Japan. It's
and Mariko's based on a real woman too, right? Because I think they use the real woman's death poem in some of the dialogue Mariko says before she dies, which is pretty cool, actually.
That is cool. I did not know that. But so like that's the interesting thing is it's being authentic to the spirit of Clavell's novel, but it's also a sort of adaptation of this historical thing that happened, you could say. So they're being authentic in sort of two different ways that I think are interesting.
Yeah, I also like, obviously this is set up to be the Last Samurai comparison is wonderful because it's like you have this white man coming to this new world, and he is essentially the main character. What I love that the show does is he is, as you said, he's kind of not. And actually the lesson of Blackthorne comes into this thinking, oh, these are these people that I can manipulate and control to get what I want. And essentially what he realizes by the end of the story is that he's just another pawn in their game. And that is so great. It is so like there's no white savior narrative here at all, right? Because who does Blackthorne save? Nobody. He doesn't save anything. He doesn't really do much of anything.
If you didn't know better, you would think that this was a clever subversion of the white savior story. That somebody saw The Last Samurai and wrote a subversion of it, and in fact, it was absolutely the other way around. Where basically The Last Samurai is just the more Hollywood sort of audience friendly version of this story.
Yeah, that's great. But what if Tom Cruise was in it and he saved all the Japanese single handedly?
Right. Yeah. As Toranaga dies, he says, "You are my son now." Yeah, this is so much more like gratifying. This, along the lines of what you were saying a minute ago. Like it's not like inviting us, the Westerner, into the culture and being like, "Welcome into this culture. Now you're one of us." It's inviting the Westerner in and being like, "He's an idiot who will never fit in." And we're going to manipulate him into just hanging around because he amuses us.
Yeah. And meanwhile, like they're like, I mean, that's the conclusion. It's like, why? Okay, Toranaga, why'd you keep this guy around? And it's because he made me laugh. That's it. He made me laugh. Like we play with the cannons for a while, right? It's like, oh, we got this huge strategic advantage that we have this guy's ship and cannons just going to mow through people. But other than that one blunder with Nagakato, Toranaga's son, like we don't see the cannons in action ever, and then the ship is burned down off screen, and he serves essentially no purpose to the plot. He's used kind of as a chess piece, certainly. Like the threat of his ship and what he represents is used as people manipulate and bargain around each other. But yeah, he's essentially worthless and is just kind of hanging out while there's these incredibly complicated maneuverings happening between Toranaga and how he's manipulating Yabushige and how he's trying to push Mariko to what he wants. And most of the time Blackthorne's just like, what?
Yeah.
Ooh, a pheasant.
You're right. I'm literally trying to think of a single consequential choice that he makes in the story and can't find one, and yet this doesn't bother me at all, which is highly unusual, right?
Well, I think the consequential choices he makes are about himself and his character and not the overarching machinations of the plot and what Toranaga is wanting and trying to do. So yeah, I mean, it's not like he's a man completely without agency in the story. He certainly does have agency. I mean, he has wonderful moments where you're like, fuck yeah, like when he stands up and that's the scene of Mariko's seppuku where he stands up and the assumption that you make and I make and probably everyone watching this made is he's about to try to step in and stop this absurd thing that's about to happen. And what does he do in that moment? No, he says he'll be the second for her because she's terrified of her being sent to hell because she is a woman who is both Japanese and say Japanese and Christian as if those two things are it's not necessarily true. She's believes in the things she believes in this culture and these things, but also is probably one of the only characters in this show to genuinely believe in the Christian faith that she believes in.
Right. Yeah. In the same way that she believes in Toranaga, even though interestingly he might not deserve it. Right.
Yeah. Oh God, we got to talk about this guy. Oh my God.
Yeah. So I wanted one thing I was going to say, just, perfectly fitting with this is that like, I heard somebody say that maybe Toranaga is the protagonist. And I immediately thought Toranaga has a completely flat arc, so he can't be the protagonist. He does not change at all. The evolution of the story is us gradually understanding what the hell he wants and gradually getting to understand like, okay, what is his plan? Like what is happening here? But this isn't his story. This is just this absolute mastermind who basically has already, in much the same way that he is telling us the future at the end of the show, he has known the future the whole time, and maybe he didn't know every twist and turn. He probably would have preferred that his son not die pointlessly, but also not sure that he cared a whole lot about his son.
Yeah,
and just like so the plot in a sense was preordained via Toranaga's vision. And so every character's choice, like you just said about Blackthorne, is really just about their character. And, almost everybody dies. So it becomes like, how are you going to live your life and how are you going to die? Are you going to live and die honorably? And what does that look like for you personally? And everybody carves their own path there. Mariko does, Hiromatsu,
Yabushige,
Yabushige, of course.
My favorite character. I love that guy. Oh my God, that actor. I think that was Tadanobu Asano. He's just remarkable.
Yeah, he's like the most fun part of the show by far.
Oh yeah. His like interactions with Blackthorne, just like the exactly who he is. and he keep everyone and like Toranaga knows who he is and yet we're still kind of disappointed with him. Like man, speaking of how much I love the show, like episode 10 with him in the water, like desperately looking for the fish and there's no fish in there. And you're seeing him reel with the consequences of the choices he made. Like that's great shit that he does actually harbor guilt for the stuff that he's done, and he just can't help himself. He's always going to be the person that's going to switch to whatever side is convenient to him at that moment. And we realize that Toranaga knew that and always knew that, and it's just like, I'm going to send you to Ishido because I know for a fact Ishido will offer you to betray me and you will take him up on it, and since I know that, I can plan around it. And like, he just can't help himself. He really can't.
Yeah, exactly. But I love that the story doesn't just like strictly condemn Yabushige. I mean,
no,
like you said, he is sort of dishonorable in this specific way, but also he's kind of honorable in his own Yabushige way, where like his code is like, he has his own code. It's just kind of a different code where it's like, it's what Blackthorne says to him, where it's like, this is a man who's going to live his life according to his terms. And so when he falls in the ocean and he thinks he's going to die by drowning and being beaten against the rocks, he's just like, this is not how I choose to die. He pulls out his sword. He's going to kill himself. And then he's rescued. And
what a fucking badass moment, man. I loved that. Like, what a great like statement of who this guy is. Like,
yeah,
that's such, and that's probably right out of the book, and that's why it's a great book. But like, just perfectly captured in this show of just like here's our defining statement of exactly who this guy is.
I honestly don't remember if it's in the book, but I wouldn't be surprised. But yeah, it's and he's consistent to that, where it's like he is a man who is trying to live by his own choices in a world where he has very little power, and he exists in this system of hierarchy, and it's almost inevitable that he's just going to get caught out. And I think he's like the least person. He's the least surprised person out of anyone that he ends up getting ordered to commit seppuku, because he's like, yeah. I mean, it's like a delightful joke to me, where toward the beginning of the show, they're writing their will in preparation for some battle or event, and he's like, I think it's our best one yet. and you realize like his life is so full of events where he's probably going to die, that he's just like, for him, writing out his will yet again is like a relaxing pre-battle activity. And so it's I love, especially I like very firmly remembered that like, after pirouetting and dancing his way through all of these tribulations, finally we get to the end, and Toranaga is just like, all right, you're gonna kill yourself now. And he's like, okay, all right,
yeah, you got me. Yeah,
that's fair. So I had that in my mind the whole show, and that was one of those moments where, like, it having it, quote unquote, spoiled did not harm my enjoyment at all. I actually was like it made it more delicious knowing the direction things are going with his character.
No, I loved it. Speaking of Toranaga, this guy.
Mm-hmm.
So one thing I sent to you very early on in the show, I think it was like 3 weeks in or something, that I thought you probably were just chuckling at me, was something I saw a tweet said. So it was like, Shogun is like Game of Thrones if Ned Stark were smart.
Mm-hmm.
And that's very funny, because treating Toranaga as if he's Ned Stark, in retrospect, was absurd.
Mm-hmm.
This guy sucks. Like, I mean,
yeah.
This is the fun reveal of episode 10 to me, with the reveal that, oh no, I was the one that burned Blackthorne's ship because I want to keep him here. The slow roll of the show, and it's again the type of thing where the show is upfront with you about this at the very beginning. Very early on in the show, Toranaga gives you his life philosophy, which is essentially like, I am a falconer. Every person is a bird that I can train and use to my will to get what I want. That's how I see people. And I think the show does this thing where, because we're spend so much time in his camp with these people that are like loyal to him to a fault, we grow to just like buy in to his stuff, and we're like, yeah, this is the good guy, and he's like doing this for like the sake of Japan and peace, and like, this is this noble goal. Yeah, I want him to be Shogun because this is going to be what's good. And you also, as you said, because this is historically based, that like he wins. You like, when there's these scenes when we're like looking at Edo and like planning, like city planning of where we're going to put stuff. It's like, well, this is Tokyo. I know this is Tokyo. Like, this is going to be the center of this entire empire. And like, so you just kind of buy into it, and you're just like, hell yeah, I want this guy to win. Fuck all these other people. Hell yeah, let's go. I can't wait to hear his plan. And then like in the 10th episode, I had this real moment of like, wait a minute. hold on a second. Everyone's dead.
Yeah.
And they're dead, like, not like, I don't want to say no, and people, the characters don't have agency. Like, I think the cool thing about Toranaga's manipulation is he's not making anyone do anything they wouldn't have done already. It's just like what he says is like, I don't control the wind, I just study it. He just knows people so well that he's very good at predicting people and knowing how to push people in a direction that will inevitably get what he wants. But by the end of the story, his son is dead. His best friend has killed himself for the sake of his thing. This woman who was, essentially a daughter figure for him is dead for his sake. and then he beheads Yabushige, and we get this beautiful shot of him alone, just sitting there alone at the top of this hill, on the top of this mountain, on this chair. And it's like, you have no one. You got everything you wanted, but you have no one, you have nothing. But that idea. And then he like the perfect like pseudo fascist line of is like, and now that I control everything, we will have peace. And it's just like, oh God. Yeah. This is, I didn't know we were on the bad guy side the whole time. And it's not like, by saying this, I'm saying like Ishido and the rest of the council was not like horribly corrupt, terrible people. Like, I'm not saying that, but like you want to make good guys and bad guys out of this whole thing. And it's very, very easy to fall into the trap of just being like, oh, this is clearly the good guy. We want this guy to win. It's called Shogun. We want him to be Shogun.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's just ambiguous enough to make me love it forever and ever, because I think like, yeah, there's definitely a lot of stuff in that last episode, particularly where they're like, oh yeah, sorry about your son. And he's like, well, you got me a new son. It's fine. And you're like, okay, you got, that's how much you valued your son. Got it.
Yeah.
But and you know, but like, I think it's what I mean by ambiguous. Like, I'm trying to think like Mariko was this woman who was like desperate to kill herself for like half her life.
Yeah.
But and only didn't do it because she was like specifically ordered not to by the people who she considered to be above herself in the hierarchy of the society. And like, so her personal sense of honor, which demanded that she kill herself, also required that she not kill herself for now. And so what he did is he, you know, granted her wish, but made sure that it happened in a way that was useful to him. and like, I think you could say the same thing about Hiromatsu, where it's like, this guy has lived his whole life as a vassal to Toranaga. He loves him. It would be his greatest honor to die for this man. And it's like, yeah, here's your opportunity. And he doesn't tell him to, right? He doesn't order Hiromatsu to kill himself. He just lets it happen for the theater of it. And
I mean, he does and he doesn't. Like, the reason I love that scene so much is because you can kind of tell these two old friends are communicating to each other wordlessly. They are like the story never tells us specifically if Hiromatsu like knows that he by killing himself, he's helping cement the story that Toranaga has completely given up. But like, you kind of get the idea that he does, right? Like, just the way they communicate, that sequence with them is so good. Like, there's so much going on without words between those two characters in that moment that I like.
Yeah. And I think after that scene, Toranaga basically confirms this by saying to Mariko, like, he understood exactly, you know, he understood his duty. And I think to me that says that at least Toranaga believes that he knew what he was doing there.
Yeah.
But see, you know, you said yes and no, and I'm like, well, that's exactly what I mean by ambiguity, because he's clever and subtle, and he absolutely does put people to a purpose and use them up, but he does so in a way where he's essentially honoring who they are and what they value in life. So yeah, like, from our cultural framework, it's pretty messed up to like use up your allies this way. But like, from the framework of his allies, they're like, yes, like, you are our honorable lord who we love. Our lives are yours. Literally, I'm not just saying that. and then he does, and then he uses them, and then he gets victory. It's like, you could flip it on its head and say, you know, his way of honoring them is to actually achieve the shogunate, to actually achieve this level of success and power that they all died for. They died for basically his glory and his dynasty. And you know, and the thing is, like, Matt, are you saying you think that? It's like, well, I'm saying that the show permits enough ambiguity that you can slip inside that cultural framework and see it that way.
While at the same time having a character like Yabushige, like, saying to him at the very end of his life, don't you see the hypocrisy in this? You sacrificed us for a victory that you're going to claim in our name. Like that, like that's absurd. That's an absurd thing you're doing. And Yabushige calls him out on it. So yeah, I mean, I agree with you completely. There is ambiguity here because I love Mariko as a character. She's like, gosh, just one of my favorite characters in fiction now. She's so complex. She's so interesting. We haven't talked about Buntaro very much yet. We're gonna have to do that.
Yeah.
Her relationship with him and you know what we see of her father and her complicated relationship with Ochiba, and also the fact that I completely forgot she was a mom.
Yeah.
I think it was like really late in the show where it was like, oh yeah, and here's your kid. I was like, wait a minute. Wait a minute, hold up. She's a mom?
Yeah.
I totally forgot about that. But yeah, I mean, like, I don't know how to feel about her end because you're absolutely right. On the one hand, she got exactly what she wanted. She fulfilled her purpose. She got what she wanted. She had this noble death that in her final moment she felt useful and purpose driven and complete. And it's like, I guess that's all a person can ask for in their life. But also there's the Western 21st century person in me that's like, but like, is that a good thing? Is it like a good thing that she spent her entire life like just really jazzed about dying and just like patiently waiting for it? And like the only way she wouldn't die is if her husband asked her to do it with her.
Yeah. Well, so, you know,
I don't know how to feel about that.
So I think it's really interesting because I think one advantage the book has that books have over shows in general is that you sort of merge with the characters in a more thorough way. And so like the reading experience of the book is much more like you really come to see things the way these characters see them. And actually, if anything, it's less ambiguous because it's like, yeah, that's the expectation. Your life belongs to your Lord. Like everybody in your society sees it that way. You see it that way. You're not just pretending to see it that way because that's what everybody else is saying. You really, really have a loyalty that like we can't really empathize with anymore. Like I was thinking about this, and this is kind of a tangent, but I think very related. Is like it's not that we don't have our own cultural extremes, but our cultural extremes are things that seem so normal to us that they don't seem like extremes. Like, you know, you lay down your life for your children. Like, of course you would lay down your life for your children. That goes without question. Obviously, what a mundane, boring statement to say. Why are you even belaboring the point, Matt? And it's like, is it like why is that such an obvious statement? And you lay down your life for your liege lord is not, right? Like it's all, I mean, I think part of it is cultural programming. Part of it is, I mean, there's this interaction between culture and sort of innate inclinations that we have that are part of the human animal that can reshape those inclinations in ways where it really becomes true to you that, you know, dying for your Lord they feel that way, the way we feel about dying for our children as a potential. And so it's like, the book can't fully make that leap for you because again, like we just don't have the cultural context, but it does put you in the head of these characters who really, really do earnestly feel this way. And so, you know, when Mariko dies or when somebody commits seppuku, like you're not, okay, well, part of it is that I was 16 at the time, but like you're really not like having this second guessing attitude. Now, obviously watching the show, I did experience it much more like you kind of describe it now, where it's, you're like, is that good? And it's like, there's no answer to that question, I think is where I end up, where it's like, well, within, you know, what Mariko says basically is, like a life without purpose is meaningless. This is a purpose. You know, everybody's going to die. So make your death mean something. And as long as it means something to you, I don't really particularly care if it seems like a good death to you, Blackthorne. This is a good death for me. This is the best death that I could manage. This is the best use of my of my life that I could manage, and she feels good about it. And it's like, how can we begrudge her that, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, that's I sound like I just came to a conclusion there, but it's like I'm just expressing that, like, that's one way of seeing it, basically.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you, and I think, like, again, what I said earlier was, I think one of the goals of the show is even if you don't necessarily get to a point where you're like, fuck yeah, go Mariko, you understand why she's doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you get her, you understand her, and Blackthorne understands her. And I think that's a really kind of through line in this entire show is Blackthorne is incredibly attracted to this woman, both physically and just, like, he's fascinated by her. But he really doesn't understand her, I think, until the very, very end. A great example of that is when he comes to her desperate, trying to get her to stop this, and he says, you know, if you're not going to do it for yourself, if you're not going to do it, like, do it for me. And she just kind of, like, shakes her head at him, because she's like, you just don't get me still. You just don't get it. Like, you don't, like, no, like, doing it for that. No, that's like, no, that's not how this works.
Yeah. Right. Good try, but, you know, no, no thanks.
Yeah.
Speaking of men who love Mariko,
Buntaro.
I don't. This is not a deep spoiler, but, like, one difference that I appreciated from the book is that in the book, Buntaro is just a guy who sucks. Like, he's just a simple, straightforward, brutish oaf of a husband who sucks. At least that's how I remembered. I remember just being like, this guy, like, I hate this guy. Like, his sole narrative function is to stand between Mariko and Blackthorne, you know, romantically. And God, they did so much more fun and heartbreaking stuff with this character.
Yeah, I mean, this guy sucks. He does suck.
He still, like, sucks. But
then he shows up at the end of the show, and, like, he and Blackthorne are, you know, buddy yanking a ship out of the water, and you're just like,
yeah,
I like this guy a little bit, or at least I understand him. I think
the main difference here is that we have, like, within a single episode, his wife tells him that, like, yeah, I recognize that, like, you're actually in love with me, and part of the reason for your behavior towards me has probably been that you're angry that I continue to insist on killing myself, but I still hate you. And
I
then
think the biggest burn in the history of burns is, more than anything, I want to kill myself, but if the only way I could achieve that is by doing it with you, I would rather live forever.
Yes, extremely burned. And then, like, the same episode, which makes it feel like it's the same day, even though I don't think maybe it is the same day. He has to cut off his father's head.
Yeah.
And you're just like, okay, what, like, you know, okay, Buntaro, you've had a rough time.
Yeah.
Just sit the rest of this one out, okay?
I mean, he's a guy that's as trapped by all the systems that anyone else is, right? Like, what choice does he have in any of the things that are happening to him? Now, he could not beat his wife. That's true. And again, I don't want to say, like, by understanding him and even sympathizing with him a little bit, you're, like, forgiving him of the terrible, shitty things he does. Obviously not. But this is the cool thing that fiction can do, and I'm so thankful they did it with this character. It was like, we can recognize his horribleness and yet still, like, really kind of enjoy getting to see what's under the surface of that. The tea scene, man, is like, it's just, it's so good. Like, again, and this is two people sitting in a room drinking tea and talking, and it's just, like, so exquisitely shot, so wonderfully acted, like the things that are being said, and then, like, the idea that this is a ritual that then allows you to perhaps peek over that eightfold fence for the first time, and so Mariko finally feels like she can be completely forthright and honest with him, and how she just, like, burns the shit out of him. It's like, how do they do this? This is so good.
I don't know. The tea scene for me was miraculous. I among many miraculous scenes, that was one where I was just like, I don't know how you did this, because it's a long, boring scene of a guy making tea and then some people drinking the tea, and it's like the most riveting thing on television. And I mean, I kind of know how they do it, right? Because it's just like, well, you're very interested to see where things are going to go with these two characters. You know, there's this incredible tension between them, and also there's all this subtlety where you're trying. I think the fact that people are so guarded with their true intentions and their true emotions really works in the show's favor here, where you're constantly like, what? Like, I still am actually kind of like, what do people actually feel about each other in this scene? And that's like a fun question. It's not like I'm frustrated that the movie is not telling me the answer, because I still have a little sliver of probability in my brain that's like, did she say that to him specifically to push him away?
Yeah.
And not because she really just fucking hates him. Like, is that even true? Or did she just say it so that maybe, you know, I don't think at that point she knew she was going to have to go back to the city, but like, just to get him away from her. And I'm like, I don't know, I don't know if there's a strong case for that, but I also don't necessarily see why she would have said that, because she doesn't take any actions that aren't like pretty calculated. So, and I again, this is just a thought that's been bouncing around my head ever since that episode, is like, is, you know, were her reasons for saying that simple? And it's like, well, probably not, because nothing ever is in this show. I don't know. What do you think about that specific question? I'm just curious.
I mean, I think she does fucking hate him. I really do. But I do think, like, yes, that was a calculated move on her part. Because she's a very calculating person. She's learned from Toranaga. Like, I think the scene works in general because, like, you're so right. You're never quite sure how people feel about each other. And Buntaro, like, doing this ritual, and like the way the camera shoots his preparation and execution of everything, he's being very meticulous, very careful, very exact with this whole thing, and that demonstrates a level of care to executing this thing perfectly that shows this is incredibly important, and she is incredibly important to him. And I think she sees that and then is just like, okay, we've gotten to, like, I've gone along with this charade for as long as I can. When you're coming to me and saying, let's go kill ourselves together, I have to put a stop to this, and I'm going to put a stop to this as definitively as I can, which is just, I don't like you. I've never liked you. I hate you. And I would rather live forever than spend my eternity, my afterlife with you.
Yeah, I think that's the thing, is I have like a superposition of multiple interpretations in my head, and I think that's one of the central ones. But I mean, you could literally also just see it as like, she doesn't actually want him to kill himself. She wants to kill herself.
Yeah.
and so sort of one way of accomplishing that is just be like, hey, I refuse to do this with you. And you know, I think even at that point in the story, I'd have to rewatch it to be sure, but like, she knows that she's going to have to be of use to Toranaga. She can't just like be self-indulgent and kill herself just because her husband finally, actually, I think that's one major thing I was thinking about, is like, prior to like that episode, she might have taken him up on the offer, but she had just realized that like Toranaga has an actual use for her. And now she's like, wait a second, okay, I definitely still want to kill myself, but there's like an honorable purpose that I can be put to before that point. And so she, you know, for the first time in the story, actually postpones suicide when given the option, which I think is interesting. So yeah, that was, all these thoughts were bouncing around, and the show never just tells you, oh yeah, it was this, this is the answer. Even in the end, I mean, that's the main thing I love about the show, is that it retains ambiguity over everything.
Yeah.
Like even in the end, it doesn't just, you know, Yabushige says, you've just wanted to be a shogun this whole time. That's all this has been about.
Yeah.
Isn't that it? And then,
and he doesn't answer.
Toranaga doesn't answer. The end, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and we leave Blackthorne, you know, pulling his boat out and loudly celebrating, and he's, I guess, kind of found his place, but also he's trapped here. He's and like Like the idea of like, and he'll rebuild the ship and I'll burn it down again. And it's just like how are we supposed to feel about Blackthorne at the end of the story either? I don't know. Like I thought what the show did with the dream sequences that position themselves at the beginning of the episode as not a dream sequence, but it just seeing the future when we see him back in England, I guess, an old man sitting in his deathbed, presumably with small children around, his grandchildren, I guess, still obsessed with Mariko holding the cross and having his kid like, did you really get that from the savages? And we make the assumption, because the show is inviting us to make the assumption, that this is just, we've jumped forward in time now and he's recalling the events of these years in his life. But then we see later that he tosses the cross into the water, and that is basically suggesting to us, no, that was not the actual future. That was, I guess, Blackthorne's dream or vision of what his future would be, or what he would possibly want his future to be, or just think it would be. And basically he gives that concept up. Like part of Blackthorne's journey through this whole thing is finding a place where he belongs, or finding purpose, or like, I think that is everyone's looking for purpose. It's just like Mariko is looking for a purpose her death can have, and Blackthorne is looking for a purpose his life can have. And
I like that.
I don't know if he gets it though. Like, I just like, he at least has something to do. But I don't know. How do you feel about Blackthorne's ending?
Well, yeah, I don't know. I agree with you there. It is only belatedly occurring to me that the name of the final episode is A Dream of a Dream.
Yeah.
So I think that connects to this idea that he's having this dream. And I think, I think one thought that crossed my mind related to that and his ending is that like that was sort of the life that he thought he was going to live. Like he thought that the life he thought he was going to have was, I'm going to go to the Japans and I'm going to be a swashbuckling adventurer, and I'm going to, suborn the Japanese and use them in this war against the Catholics, and it's going to be great. And then I'm going to go home and be a hero. And I'm going to die in England surrounded by my grandchildren, of course.
And I'm rich, right? Because he's in like a big manor.
Yeah. It's the life that he thought that he wanted. Maybe the life he assumed he would have at the beginning of the story. It was a dream. It was his dream, and now he doesn't really have that dream anymore. I mean, I think that's the moment. Like what said this to me directly in the show was when he's on his knees in front of Toranaga. And it's like this dream is whispering to him. It's like he looks over his shoulder, literally in the scene, and he kind of sees a flash of his elderly face, and he's like, "Fuck it," and he's like, he dismisses the story, he dismisses the dream. He's like, that's not my dream anymore. I'm taking my fate into my own hands, and he pulls out the dagger, and I think that like that's much like the Yabushige thing. It's like he's taking his fate into his hands. Even though his hands are somewhat limited, like he doesn't have the power to leave Japan, but he has the power to make this choice right here, and he has the, so like, I don't know. I think it's an interesting statement where it's like, our lives are all constrained in countless ways. We don't have the ability to just, I can't just sail for Belize tomorrow because the adventure of it appeals to me. Like I can't do that. I am constrained. But those constraints actually give meaning to my life, and I have chosen some of these constraints and I have not chosen others, but I don't get too down about it. Like that's just life. Life is constraints. Life is your choice within the constraints that you've been shown. So I don't feel depressed about Blackthorne's ending. I think it's just a sort of mature take on life and destiny. I don't know if that's coherent or not, but these are the feelings I was having.
No, I like that. Think? I mean, I think you're right. Like I should say, like I was confused about how to feel or how to think about it, but I was never like, I didn't leave Blackthorne being like, oh, that's so sad. I left Blackthorne being like, oh, look, he's happy. He's like, he's found something. Because I mean, we do see this as a guy who's like, who comes here as this complete stranger, is starting to learn the language, is starting to understand, is kind of starting to fall in love with the place a little bit, but is also scared and confused by it. And also, we're kind of told like, you will never be Japanese. Like, you could never be Japanese. Like, you could live here for the rest of your life and and you will never truly be Japanese. And so he's looking for a place to fit in. I love the moment where he catches back up with his crew that he's been basically begging Toranaga to free the entire time. And he doesn't fit in with those guys anymore either. Like that those guys, he recognizes them as the scumbags that they are. And it is now like, okay, well, what the fuck am I then? I'm not Japanese. I can never be Japanese, but I'm not this guy anymore either. What am I? What do I do? Where do I go? Like, and that speech he gives to Toranaga at the end is so good, because Toranaga's like, why aren't you trying to get revenge for what they did to you? Why would you not want that? And I think what he says is like, in kind of broken Japanese, is like, my war, small war, right? It's like, it doesn't matter. It's not actually important. And I love that. I love that idea of this thing that defined him was like, as you said, like, Christians bad, like Catholics bad, hate Catholics, want to kill all Catholics. And by the end of it, he's like, no, there's no point in that. There's no point in that fight anymore. I refuse.
Yeah, I think he lost the sense that was a meaningful path in his life, and you know, just building ships with this Japanese village maybe feels more meaningful now. I don't know if I'm dragging in book knowledge here. I don't think I am, because it doesn't really map one to one. But like, I think even though you're right that he'll never be Japanese, I think the act of being willing to sacrifice himself for the village in a very culturally sort of appropriate way earned him a lot of credit with that village. So it's like, if this is going to be where he lives his life, in this village, working on building ships, the village that he, you know, did this generous, very, very culturally, you know, Japanese act for, I think that gave him a much more of a sense of fitting in with them. I don't know if that's quite in the show, or if that was just kind of something I was inferring.
No, I think you're right. That is the one thing about the book I do know, is that is true in the book, because I was listening to an interview where they talked about, you know, where his seppuku scene occurs in the book versus in the show. In the book, it's much, much earlier in the story, and they took it out there because they didn't feel like in the movement of the show it was right. I think they said it would have been about episode 4 of the show that he does this. And that just didn't feel right to them. It was too soon. He hadn't moved along in his journey far enough. And so they just took it out, and maybe we're never going to put it back in at all. And then it just made sense to them to do it at the end. And I mean, having not read the book, I think that was the perfect choice. It just feels like that is a culmination moment for his character. So it makes sense for it to be at the end. But yeah, my understanding is he does that for, I think what I remember from the conversations is he's essentially told, learn Japanese in like a month. And if you don't, all the people in this village are going to die. And he's like, wait a minute, that's fucked up.
Yeah.
Why? And so he basically sets down to commit seppuku to basically say, no, I can't have that. Like, I value their lives more than my own, and I will sacrifice my life if it frees them from that obligation. And then they're like, oh, you're one of us now. And maybe that's something that they didn't want to make like textual. Like, I think this my understanding of the book is it was pretty progressive for 1975 and how it treats these Japanese characters, and it treats, you know, cultural inclusion and all these things. But maybe like they didn't want to make it textual that's like, oh, you almost killed yourself and now you're one of us, you've joined us now. It's not quite as clear cut as that. I think not explicitly saying that at the end, but also saying like, you might not be Japanese, but you do have a place here, and we do respect you, I think is kind of the maybe unspoken message of how his story ends.
Right. He's not like the filthy, disgusting foreigner, but nor is he Japanese. He is our accepted foreigner mascot who lives in the village and speaks Japanese, and you get the feeling no one's going to call him a barbarian anymore, probably. Yeah. I think so. Yeah, that's great. I love one little choice, which I think is something that maybe I only know because of literally the novel Shogun, but like there's the way men commit ritual suicide. This is me. I did check that this was true afterward, but it's one of those things where it's like probably things changed over time, and
Sure.
maybe this
Yeah.
is not like something a historian would agree with or would sign off on perfectly, but like at least within the context of the book, it's like there's the male method of ritual suicide, which is you laterally slash your belly open and then somebody cuts your head off. Um, and then there's the female way, which you either stab yourself in the heart or you cut your throat. Um, and I kind of love that even when he tries to make this extremely dramatic, heartfelt gesture um, um, of ritual suicide, he does it the wrong way because he's only actually seen Mariko do it, and he assumes that's the way you do it.
Yeah.
He does it the woman way, and it's like the show doesn't draw attention to this. In fact, I literally don't even know if this is like it feels like a choice. But I just thought that was great because it's like even when he does this thing, he still manages to screw it up, right? And I
Yeah.
actually love it. Yeah, I think it's great.
Yeah, that I obviously didn't notice that, but I think you're right. The way the show pays attention to detail, I think that certainly was probably something they did intentionally. Because so much of his understanding of the culture is through her lens and her eyes, because she is the one source he has for all this stuff. So yeah.
I don't know. There, something you said a second ago, just reminded me that like the journey we take with Yabushige is so fun because in the first episode, maybe the second episode, he like boils a man alive just to like study his death. It's like extremely disturbing. And then like within 2 or 3 episodes of that, he's just like your funny uncle. And it's just so fun how the show plays with our feelings toward him and Blackthorne's feelings toward him. It's just such a bold way of opening with a character where normally it would just be like, oh, this is a villain. This is a horrible villain.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, he's that's oversimplifying it, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really like a trust in your ability to characterize and in the actor's performance that you can establish him that way, but then trust that you can convince people to see him in a different light. I think the same is true with Buntaro, right? One of my favorite moments in the book or in the show for me was, Buntaro dies, quote unquote, and you're like, oh hell yeah, We've got the Blackthorne Mariko shit's happening now because he's dead. That trouble is out of the way, and then he comes back, and it's just like oh shit! I audibly made noise when he showed up again because I was like, fuck yeah! This is like, it's just like you could see the drama, and I think it's like the day after they hook up for the first time, right? That he shows up again, and you're just like, oh hell yeah, here we go. It's a love triangle, but it's not like a stupid lame love triangle. It's like an incredibly tense, awkward, wonderful. Like the drunk dinner scene between the two of them was just great shit, man. Just great shit. And like, but that's a thing where, Buntaro is developed as this character that sucks and you don't like. And also, as you said, is standing in the way of the two characters you want to see get together. And so the trust in the writing and the characterization and the storytelling to just be saying like, yeah, you're not going to like this guy, but like, I think I can make you like him a little bit. And I bet I can by the end of this story, so that when he shows up on the sand, these are two men mourning the loss of this woman that they both loved, and they've reached a kind of simpatico with each other.
Yeah. I think it's just a testament to how, you create empathy by just helping you to understand the character, and that's almost all that's required. Like you understand why he is the way he is, and also you like when you see him, face down like 80 guys and survive, you're just kind of like, yeah, he's kind of a badass. It's kind of
Yeah.
hard to hate a guy who is this competent. I think there's something about that.
Yeah, but then he beats the shit out of his wife, and you're like, but I like her.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true.
Don't do that to her, you asshole.
It was the sake. It's the sake.
Yeah, sure.
It's the sake.
And then he's like drunk, like shooting his arrows perfectly still. Like that.
Yeah.
God, what a cool show.
Yeah, I know. It is a cool show. Okay, one thing that you and I for some reason never mentioned this is like just literally the cinematography and like the like the camera, like the lens, like it so often most if not all of the shots are done with this like highly I don't know if it's like more spherical or what, highly different lens that gives this like vignette effect to everything where it's like blurred and darker around the edges. And I would in a vacuum expect to be annoyed by this because of how overt it was. It was like, it's like you can't even like see the character's face at the edge of the frame sometimes, but it just worked for me so well. I just like it elevated everything that was on the screen into this magical realm of like fantasy and imagination. And I just thought it was great.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's a wonderful looking show. It doesn't like okay, I'm not going to be fair to Netflix here for a second.
Okay.
Netflix shows look like shit generally. Yeah. Generally, there are exceptions to this, of course. And all I could think about was watching the show was just like how good all this looks. Like it's just wonderfully composed. It's beautiful. Like every part of it looks good and looks expensive. And it's FX. FX made this show. Like that's wild to me.
I didn't know that. That's incredible. I love that. Yeah. I mean, my understanding of Netflix is like David Fincher made that one show for them, and then they were like, everyone just do that. And then, of course, no one else can do what David Fincher does.
Yeah,
so
shittily. They just do it shittily. Yeah.
Right.
Netflix shows, like, in general, look like butt. There's a show that just came out on Netflix called Ripley that is absolutely beautiful, is like the exception that makes the rule. But that's about it's a retelling of The Talented Mr. Ripley in show form.
I heard that was good.
I need to watch it. I haven't yet, but I need to. All right. Anything else you wanted to say? I guess one thing I wanted to make sure we stayed on this is something that you pointed out to me that I didn't get, which is at the wonderful Yabushige Toranaga conversation at the very end of the last episode, where he's like basically begging him to tell him like his plan and what he wants, and he says to him, "Why tell dead men the future," or something like that. You pointed this out to me that was a callback to something that Yabushige says to, I forget the character's name, but
Omi, his nephew.
Oh yeah, but the spy is there, right, listening in, and so in that moment, that's not only Toranaga being a badass, but also basically telling him, "Yep, I was spying on you the whole time. I knew everything you were doing." And like just this really cool shit, man.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, I don't think I got that either. I think that had to be pointed out to me, and once it did, it was like it took what was already just an absolute ice cold line to end a show on, and made it even more incredible.
We haven't talked too much about Cosmo Jarvis, who I can't believe that's a real name of a real human being, but he's I've never seen him in anything before.
Actually, he is in Raised by Wolves, but
nobody watched that show though.
Yeah, I know, which is sad. But yeah, no, I go on, please.
He's just like so unique, and like he looks like a bunch of different actors to the point where like I thought this was someone else playing him for the first couple of episodes, but like the way he talks is so distinct and different. Like I don't know. I'm fascinated by it. Like I need to see more things that this guy was in, except for Raised by Wolves.
Yeah, I heard. Oh God, Raised by Wolves is genius, and I heard on an interview that like the interview, the audition they gave him was like the scene where he's drawing the world map on the sand, I believe, and that it was just like so riveting and like different from what from. So it's like, how do you do that and make it interesting, right? Because it's like you want to give the actor something difficult to show. Like, what are you going to do when there's very little happening in the scene? How are you going to make it lively? And I think that's like a great thing about him is he's super magnetic and deep, and so much in his voice and the subtlety in his eyes.
Just like the rhythm of the way he talks. It's like, just imagine this guy making a peanut butter jelly sandwich. Just like, get the bread, wheat bread, like it,
yep.
Peanut butter, and of course the jelly.
Right. No, it's like it's a couple notches away from being like too much and like comedic, like he's being a pirate, right? Like he's a over the top pirate from the 1600s, but it stays just on the right side of that, and he owns it. It's really remarkable. Yeah. I mean, it's so easy to imagine an alternate universe where you and I are having this conversation and we're like, everything was great except like, man, the white savior self-insert character, wow, what a lump piece of white bread sitting in the scene being boring, just bringing everything down, soaking up the energy. And it's like, no, that was never a problem. The opposite. Your eyes are drawn to this guy. I really look forward to seeing whatever he's doing next, because he's extremely, like, just, I don't know, inexplicably captivating, I guess.
Yeah, I really hope this launches his career into a new level, and he doesn't have to do shows like Raised by Wolves anymore.
Oh my god.
No, I agree with you. I can't wait to see. Do you know his full name? Do you know it?
No.
It's Harrison Cosmo Krikorian Jarvis.
I love it.
What an amazing person.
Krikorian.
Yeah.
Literally never heard that sequence of sounds before.
I might be pronouncing it wrong.
That's fine.
Krikorian. He was he's from New Jersey. He was born in Jersey.
See, the Wikipedia says his nationality is British, but
he moved to England when he was very young, but he was born in Ridgewood, New Jersey.
That's hilarious. Excellent.
He's great. I think, we could talk about the show forever, and I feel like there's characters we didn't really touch on at all, like Fuji, who I loved. Fuji, I loved her arc throughout the show. We didn't talk about Ochiba very much. But we could talk about the show forever, but like there's so much here, man. It's such sharp, well done writing. It's one thing I guess that we could end on is a couple things for me. Is this absolutely cements to me the idea that the binge model of television releasing is stupid and they should just stop doing it. Like, I know you had to catch up part of the way through, but like watching the show build momentum with its audience over the course of the last 10 weeks was just so fun, that like seeing people discover the show and like the hype and the conversation around the show build and build and build to where like people that don't even really watch TV are like, have you seen Shogun yet? I'm like, yeah, it's great, isn't it? Like, that's just like this cool, unique thing that TV can do. And then we have shows like, for example, Fallout, which dropped couple weeks ago on Amazon Prime, is based on the video game. Really good show. I really enjoyed it, but like the conversation on that has just died because it came out, everyone watched all the episodes over the course of a few days, and then we just move on. And I just don't know why you wouldn't release shows like this.
Yeah.
I just release your shows and do. I mean, the Hulu model is great because they do like 2 or 3 episodes at once and then weekly from there. And like that's just the best way to do it.
Yeah, I mean, that seems straightforwardly true to me. I don't know what they're thinking. I mean, it helps that it's like one of the best TV shows in years, right? But
sure,
yeah, because like, no, to be frank, nobody told me, oh yeah, Fallout, it's great, you gotta watch Fallout. But like several different people have been like, you gotta watch Shogun, So
That's because Fallout is gone now.
It's gone.
I really think if they released Fallout in weekly episodes and we were like 3-4 weeks into Fallout, so people would probably be like, "Oh, Matt, you got to check out Fallout."
Yeah, maybe. I mean, because you build that investment. Like I saw a clip on YouTube that I guess was from the first episode, and I was like, this looks, compelling.
It's fun. It's good, and there's a mystery at the center of it that is like in a weekly stretched out, like would be really compelling. I don't know why they did it this way. It's weird because it's Amazon Prime, and with some of their other shows like The Boys, they do release those weekly. So I don't know why they made the decision with this show in particular to just drop it all at once. I don't know.
Yeah, it's interesting. I have no idea.
The other thing I just wanted to say is like I talk so much about the old model of television of like, we tell stories serially, but over the course of of having this idea that episodes are these unique structural things, and I miss this thing where an episode just tells one small story that then later interconnects with other stories over the course of a season, and these things where it's just like we're just going to tell one story and we're going to tell it in 8 to 10 hours instead of a 3-hour movie, and how I've kind of like gotten sick of that method of television, that method of what prestige television has become. And I just like I not eat my words, but just be like, okay, yeah, but like when they do it good, like when they do it well, like that doesn't matter. Those complaints just disappear.
Yeah. Again, it has to fit itself to the story, I think, and very often it doesn't quite. Like one thing I thought was very, I don't know if it's strictly novel, but I can't remember seeing it anywhere else with this show, is like when a scene would end, it would just end.
Mm-hmm.
And it would cut to black, and the screen would just be like black for like a full second, and then it would just start a new scene. And I'm like, wow, have I ever seen like what a simple, I don't even know if it rises to the level of being a stylistic conceit, but it's like how often do you see it where it's like we're gonna end the scene, we're going to show you a surprisingly long black screen, and then we're going to cut to a new thing instead of cross-cutting, right? Instead of doing the J cut with the sound following you to the next scene, right, to give you a sense of propulsion and got to keep your interest. God, we'd never just have silence and blackness on the screen. That's insane. TV audiences, they'll change the channel. It's like, no, they're so meticulous and just like patient. And I thought that was really interesting about this show, just like in stark contrast to what you just said about like the different storytelling sensibilities.
This feels like a show that is like the anti all the things that I've grown to hate about the TV and TV business. Like, like even the fact that like FX hasn't like sprung out after the finale of this and said like Shogun is coming back with season 2, we're doing it. Don't you want to see Toranaga's, you want to see the fight, right? We promised the fight, and actually we were just saving that for season 2, buddy. Like the urge to do that, and probably the executives at these companies are like screaming and begging for that. But the fact that hasn't happened, and it seems like, at least talking to the creators, and some of the stuff is out of their hands at some point, is not something they're particularly interested in doing. It's very encouraging that we could just have this thing that exists and it is great and then ends, and then we just say, wow, that was awesome, I will love that for the rest of my life, and now let's move on.
Yeah.
It makes me very happy.
All of the great things in fiction just end. And
yeah. I do think there was a part of me that was wondering if we're doing this thing, because this is not a fair comparison, but the Game of Thrones prequel, House of the Dragon, essentially did this thing, Matt, where the first season of that show, which I was fairly mixed on overall, is basically just moving all the pieces towards the eventual war that we know is coming. And it was like the end of season 1 is like, and now the war has begun. and then season 2 is like, okay, it's time for the war now. You had to go through all that other stuff. Now you get the fun stuff. And there was a part of me as this thing wrapped up that was like, oh no, is that what we're doing? Is that what we're gonna do? And then we're gonna come back and say this was just the prelude to the fighting, and this next season 2 is gonna be the aliens to season 1's Alien.
Yeah, that would have been so disappointing, and yet that is exactly what we've been trained to expect from storytelling, where they're just like, gotta milk it, gotta stretch this out.
Yep. All right. Well, I think I'm good. I think I'm ready to say goodbye to Shogun in TV form. We are currently running our book club poll right now, and someone nominated the book Shogun, and that is currently winning our poll. So very, very likely that next month we will be returning to the world of Shogun by reading James Clavell's novel, which I am A-okay with. But I think we're good with the TV show, right?
Yeah, I
would. Say?
No, I'm good. I would be very happy if we got to read Shogun next month, everyone.
Yeah, so if you're a patron, if you haven't voted, it is currently winning, but you could kind of seal the deal if you head to patreon.com/doofmedia right now.
Help your buddy Matt out. Shogun. That's right.
Yeah. All right, I think we're going to do it there for the week. I know this is like the third episode in a row where I've, in the introduction, said we're going to talk about something else, and then we went on for way too long, and I said, no, we're not going to talk about that this week, but we're going to do it again. We're going to do it again.
We're going to do it again. Oh, there's the trailer for a Shyamalan thing, and it looks fun.
Yeah, the Trap looks really fun. I do want to talk about trailers in general.
Yeah.
Did you see the Deadpool and Wolverine trailer?
I did. We should have an episode where we just cover the 3 things over the last 3 weeks that we haven't gotten to talk about, and that's the episode.
I think that's a good idea.
I don't know if that's a good idea or not. Yeah, that's true.
Because we have more Darren Aronofsky to do, so that's what's next week is going to be. But that's going to do it for this week. Let us know, did you watch Shogun? What did you think about Shogun? We want to hear from you. You can reach out to us via email at doofmedia@gmail.com, over on Twitter @doofmedia, or on our subreddit r/doofmedia.
And if you're not already subscribed to the Doofcast, we encourage you to subscribe and ensure you never miss an episode. You can find the podcast on every major podcasting platform.
And if you like what we do here and want to support us and also want to make sure that Shogun will be the book we're reading next month, you can head over to Patreon. That's patreon.com/doofmedia. You can pledge at any of the available levels. You get a whole bunch of bonus content, a whole bunch of voting rights. Like who decides our books for book club? Patrons do. Who decides our monthly canon films? Patrons do. So you can be part of that community. You can help kind of dictate the content that we cover on the show, and you can also help us read Shogun. So do that.
Yeah. And it would also be awesome if you would give us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. That really does help us out, and moves the podcast up the ranks so people can find it more easily. So
we're going straight to the top, man. We're doing
straight
it.
To the top.
Number one with a bullet. All right, folks, that's going to do it for us this week. As we said, next week we will be returning to our Darren Aronofsky series with his third film. We're going to be talking all about The Fountain. We'll see you then.
My name is Doof, and you'll do what I say. My name is Doof, and you'll do what I say.